Good day, everyone. My name is Edmond. Welcome to Knet. This is our digital forensics presentation, which is going to be focusing on cellular, think cell phone, data acquisition, and best practices, and other such things, which probably will bore you. But let's move forward. We have a few housekeeping things. First off, welcome. Bathrooms are down to the hall to the left. Please take appropriate bathroom breaks. There's no need to be there all the time. You're here to learn and not hide out in the bathroom and look at your phone. You're going to silence all phones or any such electronic annoyances which cause beeps, boops, or other such noises. Remember, once again, we're here to learn, not to be looking at our phones. Take notes. Yes, we're going old school here. If you do not have pen or paper or pens, they're where at the back sign-in table. Remember to be respectful and remember elementary school. We are going to be raising our hands. So if you want to be noticed by me or someone else, simply raise your hand. If I do seem to ignore you and I do not point to you and say, yes, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, simply try to clear your throat once. Remember, we're here to be respectful and not to have sidebar conversations. Okay, we're going to start out with this infographic from Digital Information World, which gives some information as of 2020 on the American usage of our cell phones. Sadly, when 75.4% of people consider themselves addicted to a phone, it's not really usage, it's now almost a drug. What do drugs do? Bad things most of the time, and as you can see, 55.4% people look at their phone while driving. Once again, please don't do that. Texting and driving kills, etc., so forth. We've seen the advertisements. Very interesting. We use our cell phones as clocks. Well, so much for clock manufacturers. Notice the percentage of times people check their phone. People use their phone on dates. Yes, who knew that being in contact during a date is that important? Here's a very interesting one. Over 64% of people will text someone in the same room. Now, if I catch you texting in this room, will that be a good thing? No. Should we be texting each other? No, we should not. We're within the same room, we need to communicate. Of course, and then the very shocking percentage of 73.4% people use the phone on the toilet. I never knew that's a good place to check on your phone, but I guess that is our new normal. Joy. Okay, we're going to put on our cowboy hats and think about the old dusty trails of the West we've seen in movies or maybe personally experienced through the joys of binge watching on a video on demand service. This right here, which my laser pointer should be showing you, is an old wagon wheel. This is an old wagon or cart. I cannot tell you where it's at, but the main point of this discussion and graphic is that when we are preparing a forensic examination, we need to think about creating a wheel. The wheel, or this outer surface which the cart is rolling on, is what's important. That is our report. This is what people are going to understand and hopefully get some meaning from. These spokes, which come from the hub, support the wheel. So one spoke may be documentation, one spoke may be photographic evidence. Hey, that's a different form of documentation. Yes, it certainly is, but it is a different supporting structure. This may be process. This may be procedure. This may be an audit. This may be a double check. This may be storage. As you can see, every spoke has a function. If you leave spokes out or do not do enough work for them, you'll end up with a short spoke. Does a short spoke support a wheel? No, it does not. What happens to the wheel? It loses structural integrity, or in other words, it is not as sound as it should be. And as you're taking that little trip down In the Old West times, your wheel will break and crack and crash, and most probably they'll find your bleached bone somewhere. So, people want to see reports. Reports are supported by spokes. You need to make sure that you have enough spokes. They are all properly constructed, which means you have notated everything and you follow the processes so your wheel is structurally sound and your report is usable. Remember, do not shortchange on a spoke. If anyone's ever seen a rotating wheel, what happens if you have an imbalanced wheel, or if you have a spoke which is stronger or thicker than the other? You have now created a bias to the wheel, and the wheel will vibrate itself apart. Sometimes it's spun fast enough, but what's going to happen is that wheel no longer will go true or straight. That is a problem. There's also a problem in forensics. You do not want to overdo one section over another. Everything must have a balance, and everything must be done with the same amount of effort. So, think of the Old West, think of our wheel, think of the report as a wheel. We must do everything properly and make sure it is repeatable. Okay, we've gone past Old West, and right now we're looking at a sample sheet from the illustrious Guide of Computer Forensics and Investigations, the 5th edition from 2015. How quaint, it is now 2021 as the time of this recording, so 6 years ago we were given this. If you want to read this, it's very interesting, but think about these follow simple facts. Your report must be understood by all agencies and law enforcement officials. In other words, if you know that the FBI likes a specific report format, that's good for you, but you don't want to create a report for the FBI. You are creating a report the FBI can use. You're creating a report NSA can use. You're creating a report the guy down the street who is on the jury can use. Do not bias or slant something because it is comfortable. You should have a universal report format which you stick to, which contains the vital information. Now, what do I mean by vital information? We're not writing a dissertation. We're not impressing some old wrinkled wizard with patches on his jacket, but an attorney or other layperson. Yes, consider the word attorney. They know the law, they do not know technology. Do not use jargon. Do not try to bamboozle them. If you come to a crime scene at a specific time, state that. Arrived at the crime scene at this location at this time. I was given, or I found, or I located, or retrieved a phone. What type of phone is it? Do not say the cellular device. Is it a phone or not? Yes, it is a phone. Then it's made by whom? Can you identify that? If you can't, then note that. Remember, speak clearly, concisely, and avoid jargon. We're not writing dissertations here. We're not impressing some instructor, someone who calls himself Dr. So-and-so. You are here to create a report which is based on data, which must be clearly understood by anyone who picks it up. Now let's beat the subject to death a little bit more. We're going to talk about bias here, as hopefully Mr. Laser Pointer here is showing you. What is bias? Bias would be going back to the same old explanation of, oh, the FBI likes this report format. No, that is a bias. Not everyone knows what the FBI knows. Not everyone's going to follow the process of the FBI. They need to be following your process. Not the FBI's process, not NSA's process, not the process of the lawyer from down the street or the one from uptown. It is simply going to be a report which is neutral. It states facts. It states them clearly. There are timelines. You have graphics. You have video. You have whatever is appropriate, but it is not leaning on acceptance of one group of people or an organization or a process. In other words, don't simply say my final report is a video and not have a report. Some people don't want to see a video. Some people do. Some people want to read a report. Some people want to hear a report. They all should be identical. Once again, do not bias or exclude. Be as inclusive as possible. Also, here's another good pointer. Your report must be understood by a child. If you create a report, find yourself a person, a child. Think about a 5th grader. Now, if you can explain how you got somewhere, when you got somewhere, what you found, and the processes you did to create this report, and the child is following along, you have succeeded. If the child asks questions, someone else asks those questions, you need to refine and clarify. If the child doesn't understand, you're not being clear, refine, clarify, make it easy to understand. Your report is going to be a form of an educational tool. Someone needs to be able to learn something from it. Do not make it overly complex. Your job is to take complex data and processes and systems and make them easy to explain in either written, audio, visual, whatever format comes up next. It all should convey the same information, but in a way which is understandable. First contact. Yes, I do not want to use a movie from my childhood because it shows how old I am, but this is good old Lieutenant Commander Data. At this point, it seems like he has a graph from Lore, his brother, but regardless, we all recognize this person. Evil Borg. Not going into the movie, but basically, look, it's used because of one thing. This is data. This evil entity here, this creature, this organization, uses a process to make something part of a collective. A collective is like a wheel. If you don't have enough spokes, the wheel collapses. Remember that? But just showing someone a wheel doesn't help. You need to think about telling a story. The story is simply going to say, this phone, picture of phone. This is the manufacturer. It has these qualities. Explain it clearly. Like you're watching a movie, you should be able to pick up what the plot is. Investigator arrives, investigator finds, investigator documents, investigator does. Do not let people fill in the gaps. If they fill in gaps, you're not telling your story properly. It means you're not conveying your information properly. Also, a big no-no, do not confuse data capture with the process. A process is how you do something. Data is what is required from a process. You cannot simply say, I have data, and not explain how you got it. That is simply saying magic happened. Does not work in a courtroom, does not work to educate people. To each have an equal weight, explain them equally. Again, find that 5-year-old, explain your report. If they don't get it, clarify. Okay, how do we clarify? How do we describe things? Well, the good old newspaper reporters, yes, newspapers, the thing from a long time ago people used to read was printed on paper, delivered by boys and girls across America. There was a rule, the 5 W's. 5 W's are who, what, when, where, why. As you can see from this graphic, who was involved? You're an investigator, there's a suspect, there's law enforcement, there's witnesses, there's a television crew, there's an owl in the tree, whatever it is, that is who. What happened? You arrived. You examined. You performed something. That's your what. When did it happen? When did you get there? When did you grab the phone? When did you put it in a forensically sound container? When did you take pictures? These are all timeline events which will build a story. Where did it happen? The suspect's phone was found on the police car hood, on the suspect in a pile of crumpled clothes covered in blood, in the back seat, in an evidence bag. Those are where. Where did you find this? And why did this happen? Law enforcement pulled them over. Was found during a shootout. Was found in a drug home. Was found on the street. Why did this happen? Someone saw the phone on the street. Someone was searching this event. Someone was searching that event. Why? All these should be answered. Clarify. Make it understandable. Here's a few example questions. Who contacted you? Was it a police officer directly? Was it a watch commander? Was it some other process? If it was, explain the process and how you get contacted. What did you discover? In other words, don't say cellular device. You retrieved what? A phone. What type of phone is it? How old is it? It's like I had an iPhone 3. Good, that's an older phone. Describe its condition. It's scratched up. It looks perfect. It's covered in blood, etc. How was it discovered? Did you find it? Did law enforcement find it? Did some kid riding his bike find it? You need to say how it was discovered. The state of the evidence. The phone's turned off. The phone is smashed. The phone appears to be off. The phone appears to be on. The phone appears to be covered in blood and guts. Important information. Last one. What is the history of what was done to the device before arriving to the scene? If a law enforcement official arrests the subject, frisks the subject, and acquires that phone, and it sits on his hood of his patrol vehicle for 2 hours, then you're dispatched 2 hours later and you show up, there's a gap of 4 hours. You need to document why it took 4 hours for you to get to it. You need to have testimony from that law enforcement official. This phone was taken from this suspect. It was put here. At no point did it leave my sight, etc. and so forth. If you do not document where the evidence source was, the phone, at all times, the opposing side will simply state it could have been tampered with. Therefore, you've poisoned your tree of knowledge. It is now a wicked, dead, thorny bush. Game over. You're done. Document. Everything must be documented. If you have pens now and you're writing, good. That's a skill. Part of documented things. Remember it. Live it. Love it. Wake up with it. Shower with it if you need to. Whatever it is, always be documenting. Time warping. No, we're not talking about falling into a black hole somewhere and escaping it and being a giant sci-fi thing and talking to your long-lost relative, which is your child, which finds you at some point later in life and saves humanity. Yes, I do understand that is basically the plot of a movie. But time warping occurs when a device falls out of sync either accidentally or intentionally with your local time source. What do I mean by that? Your suspect just flew in from London. They committed a crime, but during the commission of the crime, they realized my phone is going to tattletale on me. I'm going to shut it off. They shut it off. They're caught in an act. They're caught during a gunfight. Regardless what happens, you're now given a phone. It appears to be off. What is the basic thing almost all phones do automatically? They will sense their location from the cellular networks and change the time. Now, what did our criminal from London do? They arrived, they turned off their phone. If the phone does not have a background update task, or something which is changing the time. That phone, as long as it doesn't receive a time sync or forced to change its time zone, will be recording events based on what time? London time. Unless you're in London, you're going to be off. The time in New York, the time in London is different. The time from New York to Florida is different. The time from Florida to Arizona is different. The time from Arizona to California is different. And then you can go all across these wonderful United States, and you could notice there's a bunch of time gaps. You must note these. This is time warping. So as soon as you can establish what condition the phone is in, note what time it thinks it is. So when you generate a report and it reads the data from the phone, it will say, hey, this is London time. But since I was powered on, I'm now in your location. I changed the time, so now there's disparity. It cannot go back and change everything, but there will be gaps. You can now explain that. When I retrieved the phone, it was appeared to be off. When it turned on, it said it was in London. There's this many hours difference. This is how we need to calculate the changes in the time and explain the gaps. Remember, your time analysis and your report should clearly document when everything happens. So if there's a gap, such as a time zone shift, you must acknowledge it. Otherwise, you've created a time zone hole or warp that your suspect can fall through, because they can simply say, well, I wasn't there, because what time does the phone say it is? What time does it say it is now? Well, obviously, it can't be in two places at once. Remember, part of documentation. Here's a wonderful one. The many states of a device. I'm sure if you have an Android device, you have seen this screen. You click this to shut it off, supposedly. This to restart it, and this is start in emergency mode, which should bypass many things, just so you can simply call 911 and simply say, hey, there's a 5-headed shark coming down the street, and it just ate my dog. Okay. Are these the only modes your phone's in? No, it is not. Your phone, like modern electronics, has various sleep modes. Those sleep modes can be activated or turned off or whatever by remote commands. Think Snowden, think about NSA, think about every sci-fi movie or whatever else. Yes, your phone truly is not off unless you yank all power to it. Since most modern phones do not have a removable battery, you should always think them in some state of being on. This has been proven by our good old friends at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST. A cell phone has more than one state of operation. It is not either on or off. There's many states in between. Make sure you're aware of that. A phone which appears to be off can be updated, changed, and erased with no indication being given to you on the screen or with your forensic tools. So make note of that. There is no on and off on a phone. Just like there's no on and off, there is no on and off for communication. A cellular device can connect to cellular networks, logical, Wi-Fi networks. NFC, which is near field communication. Think about smart terminals or tap to pay. Bluetooth, the things which you sync up those funny little earbuds to. And some legacy phones even use IRDA, which is infrared. Is this all the communications methods possible? No, it is not. Some phones, depending on intent and use, can use a variety of these. Again, you may use many other different things. Some of them, yes, even can be basic radios. Another unknown fact, you do realize that most modern phones have a built-in FM receiver, but because of licensing in the United States, that feature is turned off. If someone turns that on, a receiver can become a transmitter. Now you have an FM device which is receiving and transmitting. Have you thought about that? Most people have not. You need to be sure you're aware of every way that phone can communicate. And once again, the phone is never truly off unless you remove all of its sources of power, so it can still be tampered with. Also remember deadband switches. If I have a phone and it needs to communicate via some method every so often, otherwise it erases itself, oh, that's nasty. Remember, it may appear to be off, but it's not. Be careful, document, make sure you're prepared for every eventuality. This graphic right here discusses standards, rules, methods, guidelines, compliancy, and more. What is a standard? A standard would be like ISO. A rule would be like do not stick your hand on a bare electrical wire and step in water. Methods. To bake a cake, we must do the following. Guidelines. Please try not to taunt the bears or climb over the fence. Compliancy. This is do not speed, because to be compliant with the law, you need to stay under that maximum speed limit. How does that work in our field? You need to ask a series of questions to get those answers. And this should be very easy to follow. Think about going to a drive-thru. You drive up to the drive-thru, they're going to say, hi, welcome to, Skippy Burger. These are our specials. What do you want to have tonight? The next person comes through, it's repeated. It's a script. You can audit a script because maybe they record these things. You need to make sure you're following the same steps. You receive a phone, what do you do? Repeat that process for every phone until you need to change that process. Then you need to have justification for the change and explain it. Remember, if it's not documented, it's not provable, and it's probably not valid in court. If you note something, you create an audit trail. You document it. No trail, no proof. How do you follow your documentation? Means you have a process, means you stick to it. If you need to vary from it, you must document it. Remember, if it's not documented, it probably didn't happen. If it didn't happen, you're creating doubt. If you create doubt, you're going to let a criminal slip through your fingers or through the justice system or whatever you want to imagine. And believe me, there's a lot of things bad which can happen. The CSI method. While I would have wanted to use the overly used Horatio Kane graphic here, I felt we should give Horatio a break, and I simply showed a educational arena in some foreign country where these budding CSI technicians, all dressed up, apparently going to do surgery, some of them, and are looking at something we cannot see. Maybe it's a person, maybe it's an alien. Heck, it could be E.T. Did he come home in the wrong place? Oops, sorry for E.T. Now, back to E.T. and his communication. If a phone is covered in blood, who gets it first? Well, a bloody phone is dangerous because blood conducts. You can short out a phone. So someone's going to have to take the blood samples to get DNA evidence, which can exonerate or prove something. Once again, not your field, but you need to understand the hierarchy of chain of command. If you don't know who the phone belongs to, it needs to be dusted for prints. Someone else is going to do that. But remember, to maintain a chain of custody, you always must say, I discovered a phone. This is a condition it was in. I gave it to this technician. They performed the following. Then I got the phone. Then you can clean it up or do whatever else to get to what you need to do. Remember, always maintain a chain of custody and always document. If someone's going to put fingerprint dust all over a phone, great. Let's hope the dust isn't conductive. Conductive dust, bad. You can short things out. If it has blood on it somewhere and they want to do DNA recovery, great. Document it. If someone says, hey, what if they have skin cells in the SIM slot? State that that's a possible source of information. Document it. It's sent off to another department. They're going to send it back to you. Simply state, at this time, the phone left my possession in a sealed container. It went to so-and-so. They did your process. You can include part of their report and then continue in your section. Now notice I keep on bringing up blood and biologicals. We must keep some things in the forefront of our mind. Bodily fluids are mostly conductive. What doesn't mix? Water and electricity. If a bloody phone is given to you, you better hope it didn't short something out or corrupted something. Because have you ever tried to clean out the communication port of a phone? If you haven't, try it. Make sure you have the proper tools. Document it, take a picture. Exhibit whatever. Bloody phone. How I cleaned it. Pictures, document. Took so many swabs, cleaned it with this solution, did the following, then plugged in this to extract data. If you find out later the data is corrupted, you can simply go back and say, the phone was covered in blood, so it is quite possible it could have damaged this phone. Then you need to get authorization to do more forensic hardware analysis, which would be to disassemble the phone and simply take pictures and state, yep, there still is blood in this area. It shorted out this, that, and the other. Maybe it caused some corruption, maybe it didn't. But remember, if you document why it left your site, or you document its condition, you can prove to a court or a jury, hey, this is why this may have happened. These are the steps I took. Once again, documentation. Hey, remember the word documentation. Write it in big bold letters. Inscribe it on your forehead. Put it on both your hands. I don't know, put it on your shoes. Along with TGIF, which stands toes going first, document. Stay on target and be understood. Now processes, reporting, and more. Remember the moldy oldie professors? They dress funny, smell like old clothing, and probably will talk about old times they walked uphill to school both ways and had to find out a dinosaur. Your report should never sound like something you give them. Your report should be aimed for that 5-year-old child, saying, I found a phone, this is the condition, this is what I did. Clarify everything. If your data extraction method requires using a cable to plug into some interface which then plugs into a computer, explain that. Phone model XYZ was covered in blood, was cleaned, port was examined, picture before, picture after. I use this cable, picture of cable, plug-in cable, picture. Plug-in cable to this device. This device does basically these things. Show you plugging it in. Then plug in this into a PC or whatever your terminal is. You've ran the program. You can take pictures of you clicking the big buttons if you want. Whatever it is, you need to document everything. Now, what happens if during a long examination or a lot of evidence which is gathered that something changes? Document the change. It is good practice, and it should be part of your policy of your department. Version 1 did this, version 2 did this. I would repeat the same steps you did in version 1 to version 2. If there's differences, then you can note it clearly. Version 1 retrieved X amount of data, version 2 did X plus Y, then use the second method, because obviously the first version is missing something. Do not play hodgepodge. We use version 1 to get this, version 2 to get this. No. Bad form. If you're going to do that, you need to explain why in detail. People want to see a consistent tool set. If you cannot use a consistent tool set, explain in detail why. Explain how these tool sets work with each other. Make sure they can read and write the same data, etc. and so forth. Remember, we're educating the potential jury, that lawyer, the judge, the alien who lost his phone from a previous scene and landed in a bad backwater country, etc. Everything technical you do should have a simple example. Pictures are wonderful. Audio narration is wonderful. Video is wonderful. Use it all to your advantage. Remember, no bamboozling. You're not writing for an instructor. You're not going for a degree. You're trying to explain something. Be clear, concise, explain everything. Validation. Now, this does not mean someone's going to come up to you and say, gosh, you're an awesome cellular forensics technician, and here is a raise. No. Validation avoids this from this little comic. Mathematical formula, more math, what's in the middle? Then a miracle occurs. What is a miracle? Obviously something undocumented. If it's undocumented, did it happen? We don't know. Should your reports ever have a miracle occurred, magic, something appeared? No. As it states here, you need to be explicit. You need to state why everything happens. One of the best ways to prove something happened is to validate it. Validating could be a checksum or a hash that shows that your data you retrieved using the bitwise method was correctly performed. You can create a hash of a phone's data using many versions of, or actually different programs. If the data is the same, the hash should be the same. If the hash is the same, you've created a validation. This data is the same, regardless of how it's extracted. Once again, Mr. Timeline could be helping here because your timeline could show I brought the phone to the lab. At this point, it was turned on inside of a Faraday environment. It did show these calls. When we use this process, it also matches this number. If it doesn't match, then you explain why. If it does match, you say validation via picture of phone showing this. Checksum and same information from program, same information in report, explain. Everything should be the same. So when you explain the same, the explanation should be almost the same, but it's going to validate. You always want to have proof. Once again, proof means no, then a miracle occurs, magic, etc. That means if you need to take pictures, take notes, whatever it is, you're proving as you've done everything. You need to prove that this hash works. The hash was done in this methodology. It has been proven by these reports, by this process, by this whatever. You need to make sure you explain it. Don't simply say the hash values match. What hash? MD5, SHA-A01, SHA-256. Hello. We need to make sure everything is validated. We need to make sure we're consistent. And remember the picture with data. Just because the data is there does not mean the process is not important. They both are important. You need to document both. Validation means more than hashing. Validation also means your process can be proven and audited. So in other words, that 5-year-old can repeat the steps in your report pretty much and get the same result. I know for some people they have no idea what this is. This is an audio cassette. This is definitely a 90s version with the clear cases. This right here is what we call a video cassette. This is a VHS cassette. I know that because, well, I worked on enough VCRs. This, of course, is craft paper's yellow. This is craft paper, which is purple. What does this have to do with cellular forensics? Our reports can come on paper, removable media, which probably neither one of these are going to be, but here we're talking about CDs, DVDs, Blu-ray, etc. You don't see this as much. Nowadays you may see copies in a cloud or in USB, etc. Photographic evidence, of course, that's old-time pictures. Now we have a lot of digital pictures. And then written accounts. A written account could be from the law enforcement officials saying, hey, I did the following that needs to be included in your report. In other words, means you didn't chase down the bad guy or suspect. You don't know how the phone got there. All you know is you were called out sometime later. You got the phone, you followed your process. So you're going to have to include a written account of the person who did that. Okay, all documentation must have a hook. What does that mean? Think about fishing. Hooks grab fish. Why do they grab fish? Because the fish thinks it's something shiny. It thinks it's food. When you're writing a report, you need to have a hook. Okay, not everyone wants to read a report, as my next point here talks about. Okay, if you have an audio narration with no video, maybe someone can listen to this and say, okay, what's written matches what the audio is. But the biggie I am going to tell you guys and girls today is to find a teenager and look up YouTube. YouTube is full of how-to videos. People are addicted to them. You can find out almost everything. Not necessarily correctly or completely, but it does capture people's attention. If you need to put a picture of a cat, if it's relevant to the case, put the picture of the cat in there. Aim the little cell phone camera at you saying, hi, I'm Examiner XYZ. This is my number. This is the date and time. Here are the tools that I'm going to use. I'm going to explain in clear language how this tool is used. Hey, look, here's this cable. Here's that cable. Here's the power supply we use. We're in the field. Here's the one we use. We're in the lab. Hey, do you guys know what a Faraday cage is? Quiz. How many people think Faraday cages block signals? They don't. If you put a cell phone inside of a Faraday cage, cellular transmissions are not going to bounce off of the cage. They're simply going to flow around the cage. So the device inside the cage does not receive the signal. Likewise, the device inside the cage cannot transmit out of it because it's going to hit the cage material. Now, if you can get really scientific for a moment, that material is going to have a charge because the way a Faraday enclosure or cage is made, that charge will be negated by the other side of the material. So think about a cage like a box. You're going to put a little cube inside this box. This cube every 10 seconds will sound out a 1 centimeter cube, and it's going to try to get out. What's going to happen in a Faraday environment is that 1 centimeter cube or transmission is going to hit that enclosure, but the other side of that enclosure is going to be generating a negative value so as to collide and nothing happens. So does it block? It does when it's inside, but it doesn't block stuff outside from getting in. It simply flows it around because yes, it is wire or is conductive, so transmissions will occur through it. Therefore, Faraday materials or Faraday enclosures must always be tested to ensure they're working properly, they don't have holes, rips, etc., and that they actually are working. Right now, I do not know of many enclosures which do work with NFC transmissions as well as they should. A lot of people like these little bags. Guess what? These bags don't block all NFC signals. Why? Because NFC transmissions can be at different power levels. If you ever seen a classic example of an Android phone where the couple touches the two phones together and a picture goes across, great. But now, like with Apple devices, you have airdropping. That was going to transmit with a greater energy than two phones coming together. So what blocked intimate contact may not block an external contact or a different method of communication. Remember, this is something you show in a video. This is something you need to explain. If you put in a video, put it in audio, put it in a report, they all should agree with each other, and everyone should learn something from each source. Remember, you're here to educate whatever that hook is, whether it's audio versus video, a bubble map, etc. You're always educating. We're going to conclude with a statement from Mr. Walt Disney. Around here, however, we do not look backwards for very long. He was talking about his company, but this is something you need to keep to heart. Just because a process works today doesn't mean it will work tomorrow. Don't look backwards. Always be looking for change. This leads into his next part. We keep moving forward. Keep moving forward is in bold because you have to move with the technology. There isn't a book you can buy which is going to explain every phone. By the time it gets to the publisher, several revisions of the phone could be out. Globally, you can have dozens of variations. You have to move forward. Now, the rest here may seem to be artsy, but it is true. Opening up new doors and doing new things. That could be revising techniques, processes, tools. You always must be looking for the next thing which can help explain or extract data, because we're curious, and curiosity keeps leading us down new paths. In this case, yes, we're curious, but we're using our curiosity to prove or disprove something, which is going to help us generate a report, which needs to be understood by someone, so we need to make sure we're using everything available. Mr. Disney has passed. Hopefully you guys will not pass soon. If you do, I'm sorry. But until the day that you're laid to rest, you should always be looking for that next new thing. You should be reading the blogs. You should be reading the books. You should be listening to your compatriots. You should be listening to the opposition. You should be keeping yourself moving forward, as nothing is written in stone. Thank you for listening to me today, maybe mid-morning. Due to the joys of our new connected world, I have no idea when you're hearing this, but I do say thank you. And have a good day.